Hello, Mishpucha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with my August reading wrap-up and rankings, my TBR for September, and an announcement. So I'm going to start first with the announcement. So the announcement is basically that I'm going to, as of September, scale back to probably one video a week on BookTube. Because my semester has gotten underway and started again, and because it's totally in person, and you know, I have all of these students to handle in person, plus advisees, plus all the service related things that I do, etc., etc. It's just, it's a lot. And so even though I'm thankfully not going in and teaching 5 days a week, I'm only on campus 3 days a week, it's still kind of a lot for me to juggle. So I think until I kind of find my footing again with the, you know, 100% face-to-face in class teaching, I'm gonna have to scale back to one video a week. But I am still gonna be around, and I am still gonna try to get caught up on my ever-growing backlist of BookTube videos that I've been not watching. So anyway, all right, so I'm trying to be efficient in this video, so I'm gonna combine my August reading wrap-up and rankings with my September TBR. There's only one book that I finished today that I've not already talked about at greater length in a Friday Reads video previously. So I will go ahead and talk about that now. So I finished this morning The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio, I think is her name. And I listened to this as an audiobook. It's quite short. It's like 5 hours long or something like that. And basically the author travels to various parts of the country, New York, Miami, Cleveland, Flint, Michigan, a couple other places, and interviews undocumented Americans. And with their own stories, she kind of interweaves her own story and her family's story because they're also undocumented Americans. So we hear about things like undocumented immigrants who helped with cleanup after September 11th, 2001, and then how, you know, years after the fact, they're now suffering long-term physical consequences from doing 9/11 cleanup, respiratory illnesses, and things like that. But because they're undocumented, they're not able to get always access to healthcare resources. Then we also hear about undocumented day laborers and kind of the dangers of being a day laborer and how oftentimes they're not even paid. I mean, we already know undocumented workers don't get paid as much as you would if you were a native-born American who had a regular job. But sometimes they don't even get paid at all. The person who's employing them just stiffs them, and you know, there's nothing they can do about it. They don't have any recourse because the employer can just like threaten to call ICE, etc., etc. So we hear all these different kinds of stories, and then throughout the volume, Villavicencio interweaves her own and her family's own story. Now she herself is an undocumented immigrant who managed to go to Harvard, so that's very impressive. And she's a journalist by profession. And so yeah, it was very eye-opening for me. This was not I mean, obviously, like, I know that there are undocumented immigrants in this country and probably every country on earth, but it was just like never a political issue that I'd given a ton of thought to. And so this was very eye-opening for me in terms of seeing how people live who, because of my own privilege of being both white and a native-born American citizen, like have the privilege to just like go about my life and like not even think about it. So I feel like it was definitely an important read for me for that reason. And I found the stories that she conveys from the people that she interviewed quite compelling. I do wish that she had sort of separated her own story more from the other stories she was telling, because they would just be sort of all weaved together within the chapter, and I kind of just wish that there had been a clearer distinction between, you know, this person who did 9/11 cleanup story, and then like in the second half of the chapter she talks about how that relates to her and her own experiences, versus it sort of, like I said, being interwoven. But aside from those sort of structural issues, I did quite like the book overall. And as I said, I listened to it as an audiobook, and she narrates it herself, so I would recommend that. So I ended up giving this 3.75 stars. So with that, I'm going to do an abbreviated ranking. So I ended up reading 14 books in the month of August. So I'm just going to do it sort of rapid fire style here. So as always, I rank these from the book that I enjoyed the least to the book that I enjoyed the most. So at number 14 was Diana Abu-Jaber's Arabian Jazz, which I read for my own personal Arab American literature project. And this book has an interesting premise. It's about a man named Mutasim Ramud and his two grown daughters, Malvina and Jamora. And the characterization is good, but not enough happens in this book, and unfortunately I was just bored throughout most of it. So it got 2.5 stars from me. At number 13 was Sonia Renee Taylor's nonfiction book, The Body Is Not an Apology. I read this for my local yoga studio's book club that they just started. We actually had our meeting about it yesterday, which I quite enjoyed. But yeah, so I ended up giving The Body Is Not an Apology 3 stars. I really liked its central premise, and I really liked the toolkit that Sonia Renee Taylor gives at the end, but I found a lot of it quite repetitive. So 3 stars. At number 12 was The Travelers by Regina Porter. I ended up giving this book 3.25 stars. It tells the interweaving stories of two families in the United States, one white and one black, that keep sort of having intersections with one another throughout multiple generations. And I liked the idea of this book more than I liked the execution, because I feel like I didn't get to spend enough time with many of the characters to feel really invested in their stories. At number 11 was Dan Greenberg's How to Be a Jewish Mother. I gave this 3.5 stars. It's a light, little humorous read, and I did find it funny, but I also found it quite dated, so just be aware of that if you pick it up. At number 10 was Harryette Mullen's Blues Baby. So this collects her earliest volume of poetry, Tree Tall Woman, with her other early poems into one volume called Blues Baby. I liked this overall. It's not as experimental as Harryette Mullen's later work, and I am someone who likes more experimental and avant-garde kind of poetry, but I still liked it overall, and I would recommend it, so 3.5 stars. Coming in at number 9 was Danez Smith's poetry collection Homie, which I also gave 3.5 stars. Similarly to the Harryette Mullen volume, I liked this overall. I thought it was interesting. Some of the poems in this collection are experimental. For me, it was an issue of tone, because I was never really sure how to take some of the poems, because within one poem, Danez Smith would go from being very sort of serious and somber to being like lighthearted and playful, and I wasn't really sure ultimately what to do with that. So I gave that 3.5 stars. At number 8 was Daniel Silva's The Rembrandt Affair. This is the 10th book in the Gabriel Allon series. I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars. For me, this was a good return to form for Daniel Silva. It was mostly streamlined. There wasn't a ton of excess crap like there is in a lot of his books, and he focused the book on the unfinished business of the Holocaust, which he had not done since books 2 through 4, and I do feel like he is at his best when he does that. So 3.75 stars. At number 7 was Brit Bennett's The Mothers. This tells the story of two girls in their youth who bond over their shared motherlessness. Aubrey and Nadia, I think her name is. And also they sort of share a love interest at different points in their lives. So it's kind of a coming of age story for both of them, and I found the depiction of their friendship and its evolution over time compelling. I also liked the sort of chorus of like the mother characters, although I wish that had been used to better effect. throughout the book, but I really didn't like the love triangle aspect. So ended up giving this 3.75 stars. And number 6 was Carla Cornejo Villavicencio's The Undocumented Americans, which I talked about at the beginning. So I gave that 3.75 stars. And number 5 was Jean Hanff Korelitz's The Plot. This was fun. I gave it 4 stars. It was an interesting, like, sort of slow burn cat and mouse kind of thriller, but also I found it somewhat thought-provoking, and I liked all the literary references that are included throughout, so enjoyed this. I want to read more of Jean Hanff Korelitz's work, which you'll see on my September TBR, so I like this, gave it 4 stars. And number 4 was Octavia Butler's Bloodchild and Other Stories. I also gave this 4 stars. This edition of it has an afterword written by Octavia Butler following each of the stories where she talks about her motivation and inspiration to write the stories. I really enjoyed the feminist thrust of a lot of the stories. And I also really liked the afterwords, and there were 2 essays included in there as well. So 4 stars, would definitely recommend it if you like short stories and or you like Octavia Butler. And number 3 was Jerzy Weil's Mendelssohn is on the Roof. This gives a snapshot of Nazi-occupied Prague from a lot of different perspectives. I quite like this overall. I gave it 4 stars. I did feel that it was sort of disjointed in tone because the first half of it is sort of darkly comedic and the second half of it is just like somber and serious. But aside from that, I really liked it and I would recommend it, 4 stars. At number 2 was Robin DiAngelo's Nice Racism, How Progressive White People Perpetuate Racial Harm. I also gave this book 4 stars, and I found it really useful in thinking about how I myself have been complicit in upholding white supremacy and what I can do to sort of further reflect on and change my own ingrained racist behaviors. I would absolutely recommend this to anyone who considers themselves a white progressive. And then the best book that I read in the month of August was Kiese Laymon's memoir, Heavy, an American memoir. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It was excellent. It is the best memoir I have read since Tara Westover's Educated. It's very raw in its subject matter, content warnings for a bunch of things, including sexual abuse and eating disorders and gambling. But it's so good, and Laymon works through his own trauma of the own unprocessed trauma of the past and how that sort of informed his own relationship to his body, and how his own trauma has informed his relationship to his mother over time as well. And then I feel like the whole thing you can kind of take, even though it is a personal memoir, you can take as kind of a metaphor for the relationship of the United States to African Americans more broadly. So yeah, I really love this. I thought it was smart. I would definitely recommend this to any reader, especially if you like memoir. So 4.5 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of August. So moving on to what I plan to read in September. So I have some carryovers, so I will still be working on the essential writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I'm legit at the halfway point, so that's exciting. I'm not going to finish this in September, but I will still be reading it. I will also continue reading into September People Love Dead Jews by Dara Horn. I'm about 50 pages into this. It's really interesting so far. All of these essays, at least so far, have to do with how people like hearing about, basically like hearing about Jews who have already passed away and finding some sort of inspiration from, you know, stories of murdered Jews, but don't necessarily care about Jews who are still living. So this is definitely interesting so far. I'm also still reading Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis. This is considered the quintessential campus novel, so we will continue this into September and finish it in September. I'm also still reading A Very Stable Genius by Philip Rucker and Carol Linig, which is about the first 3 or so years of Trump's presidency. So we'll finish that in September. Also in September, I plan to read for my Arab American Literature project Alligator and Other Stories by Dima Alzayat. This is a collection of short stories. Dima Alzayat is a Syrian American writer, and I think this has some mixed media format, so I'm interested to see how I get on with that. I will also be reading in September John Boyne's novel A Ladder to the Sky. This was gifted to me by Lindsay in our holiday book exchange last year, and I think this was the first book that won the inaugural BookTube prize a couple of years ago, and so I've heard a lot of good things about it. I'm excited to get to it. I will also be doing 2 buddy reads in September, neither of which I actually have the books here with me, but one is The Old Drift by Namwali Serpell. This is an epic about Zambia, and it traces, I think, 3 different generations of people in Zambia. So I'll be doing this as a buddy read with Roz of Scallydandling about the books. And then the other buddy read I have planned for September is of Suvankam Tamavongsa. I think that's how you say her name. I really should have checked that before I started filming this video. Of her collection of short stories, How to Pronounce Knife. Tamavongsa is a Canadian Laotian writer, and I believe this collection won the Scotiabank Giller Prize in the last year or two. And I've heard some good things about it, so I'm interested to read that, and I will be doing that as a buddy read with Brian of Bookish. And this is going to be Brian's and my first buddy read, so I'm definitely excited for that. I also plan to read in the month of September The Drunkard's Walk by Leonard Mlodinow. And this is a book about randomness and how we try to see patterns in things, even if the patterns aren't really there, but that really things are more random than we think that they are. And this is like a short little nonfiction, I'm going to call it in the genre of pop psychology sort of thing. So excited to get to this. And then lastly, in September, I would also like to read a previous work of Jean Hanff Korelitz, which is The Devil and Webster, and this is another campus novel, and it tackles issues of identity politics on campus, on college campuses. So since that's something that sort of directly affects me in my profession, I'm definitely curious to read this, especially since I enjoyed the plot as well as I did. So you will notice that is a shorter TBR than I usually set. It's only six additional books plus a few books that I'm still currently reading. And the reason for that is because I actually already hit my reading goal for the year in August. My goal was to read 100 books, and I'm currently, as of today, at 105 books, so I feel like between the fact that I'm now back to teaching 4 classes in person, et cetera, and kind of the stress that goes along with that, and the fact that I've already hit my 100 book goal for the year, I can kind of slow my roll a little bit on the reading, and I don't feel sort of compelled to get through quite as much as I, was trying to get through before. So, so that's everything. So these are the books plus the Emerson that I'm going to be reading or continuing into September. So yeah, thank you for watching this. If you have thoughts about any of these books, I would love to hear that. Let me know what your favorite book that you read in August was. Let me know what you're excited to read in September. So I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?